Yeah, now today we are Thimphu, the capital, and Paro is under lockdown.
Oh,
really?
Yes,
I
yes.
thought it's now waning in South Asia and we can meet, but no, it's not that way, I see.
Yeah, we were reopened just a week ago, but still then I think the new variants has been detected in the community. So since 5 o'clock today morning, so we are on a lockdown.
Oh God. You see, because since you see tourist traffic has started also now, so people have become a little less careful and not as
Yeah.
alert that they were.
Nice to have Maldives presentation this time. We've been missing that, so I'm glad Maldives has joined today also.
Very good.
Welcome, Mr. Ajwad Mustafa. Sri Lanka also, Sugat Dharmakirti is here. Sonam.
Hi, good morning, Jyoti. Hi.
Good morning, Mr. Sen.
Good morning, all.
Good morning, everyone.
Hi, good morning.
How are you?
John must be now 20, close to 20, 22 years for the SARI initiative.
Yes, that's right. 2000 we started it. Yeah.
Yes, I remember I was the JS that time and we had started this initiative.
Yeah, it's amazing to see how productive it's been, and really the many accomplishments. We were just thinking about regional cooperation back there and talking about wheeling power from Nepal and Bhutan and Bangladesh, and now it's all happening and significantly expanding too. So it's great to see.
So from how to get started, we are moving to how to accelerate.
That's right. I think the first real meeting was in Kathmandu. Probably, I think it was 99 or 2000.
Yeah. Yeah, the first time I went to Dhaka was in 2005 on a SARI energy meeting. And then Dhaka was my last post with USAID. So I just left there in July.
I see.
Dr. Shanti Sukh has joined yet? No?
Well, Jyotiji, I think we can kick off or wait for 2-3 minutes.
Mr. Batra, what do you think? He is probably calling Dr. Shanti Sukh. I don't see him.
Ma'am, we are calling her. Just give us 2 minutes, please.
Okay.
Sure. Go ahead.
So I'm glad about this partnership with ICC. You have been also working in this area for some time, isn't it?
Yes, they've been more active, I think, on the BIMSTEC forum so far.
Yes.
And I think we had a very good meeting a few years back in Kathmandu and also in Dhaka. So I think it's time that we should start spreading out also. I think Sri
Right.
Lanka is long overdue.
Yeah, this time we have Sri Lanka, Maldives. We have BBIN countries always there. Pakistan is also there.
Bhutan, of course, has been
Always
virtually
yeah.
the starting point, in Nepal, I
Bhutan
would
was
say.
the pioneer, right. Anuradha,
Yes, ma'am.
so when should we start? We're waiting for Mr. Shantisuk, Dr. Shantisuk.
Ma'am. Just give me a minute. I'll just speak to ICC and I'll get back to you.
Ma'am, Juhi Malhotra will be the MC for this event, and
yes, sir.
Serene is there to support her.
Right.
Hello.
Hello.
Pankaj, in your presentation and the agenda, I was seeing that India is not mentioned. You did not study India?
We did study India, sir. In the agenda, Indian side is not represented in the panelist, but yes, we did study the whole of South Asia, and India is a big portion of that because
okay, that's what I was wondering.
Most information of India only.
No, I think unfortunately there's been some emergency meetings, I was told, and
yes, we were not able to get anyone
to physically be there.
Well, and also Mr. Batra himself will talk about India, so that's.
Yes, well, of course, we are there too.
Yeah.
And we'd especially like to hear from our fellow panelists from the other countries, because
absolutely
the information we got was in the public domain, and some, of course, was helpfully given by some of the countries themselves also for information which was not available in the public domain, because we sought some of their help. So we've compiled this based on that, and of course given recommendations which involve a lot of thought. Hopefully it will be beneficial to everyone who's here.
Sir, I've been trying to reach Dr. Shantisuk, but then I'll keep trying, but sir, we can start in the meanwhile.
Dr. whom? Sorry?
Dr. Shantisuk.
Shantisuk from
Laupedia. Okay. Doesn't matter. I think we can start in case she joins at a later stage. We can bring her presentation later. I think that's fine, because the inaugural session, everyone is there except her, right?
Good morning, Muhammad Hussain. Good morning. This is Anil Razdan wishing you.
Good morning. Sorry, every time I have a clash with other session. So I will be in time when my panel discussion will be there. So no problem.
Right.
I think it is at 12 at your time and 12:30 for us.
So Mr. Muhammad Hussain is a very sought after man in Bangladesh. The Director General of PowerCell in the ministry, which means the technical arm of, just like CA is in India.
Very good.
Heading that.
Hello, Mr. Anil. Nice to see you. I'll join. In fact, I am having another parallel session with my secretary.
Right.
So I'll try to quit that within half an hour, and then we'll join you.
We look forward.
Can we join inaugural?
Muhammad Hussain ji, Mr. Anil Razdan is ex-Secretary Power and continues to be very active in the power sector.
Right.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Should we start?
Yeah, we can start.
Am I audible?
Yes, go ahead.
A very good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome to the webinar today, which has been jointly organized by Indian Chamber of Commerce and Integrated Research for Action Development to disseminate the findings of the paper on risk mapping and impact assessment of COVID-19 on South Asian power sector. As we all know, the spread of coronavirus and subsequent lockdown imposed in the South Asian countries to contain the pandemic caused an unprecedented loss to the distribution companies in all the South Asian countries, as well as supply chain risks and investment risks. It has presented a challenge to the power system operators due to a substantial reduction in the demand of electricity grid for a sustained long period. In order to mitigate the above-mentioned risks of a reoccurrence of such a situation in the future, USAID's SARI EI program, currently being implemented by IRADE, has authored a paper on risk mapping and impact assessment of COVID-19 on the South Asian power sector. This could help the countries define policies and refine regulations, standard systems and procedures in order to counter the black swan events in the future. Today, this webinar is being attended by various experts from power sector from the South Asian countries and eminent people from our industry. Ladies and gentlemen, as we begin this meet, let me invite Dr. Jyoti Parekh, who is the Executive Director of Integrated Research for Action Development. She was also the member of the Prime Minister's Council on Climate Change and a recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize awarded to IPCC authors in 2007, to kindly present her welcome address, please. Let's welcome Dr. Jyoti Parekh.
Before that, just to clarify that this is organized by the SARI program, the South Asia Regional Initiative on Energy Integration Program, in which IRADE is the implementing partner. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you, Juhi and Mr. Batra. It is my honor and privilege to welcome you all, especially from people who have come from South Asia. And also, I would like to give a very warm welcome to our old friend, colleague, and mentor, Mr. Anil Razdan, and John Smith Sarin is our partner, USAID. We are happy that all of you are here to understand what are the findings of our report. As you know, SARI program is a flagship program of USAID and also IRADE for last 10 years. And over these 10 years, we have 10 years, 10th year is going now. And over these years, we have done something like 40 reports and also 120 or so events. And we find that new risks and new opportunities are facing power sector every year. COVID-19 turned out to be that a risk that we had never known, and yet in South Asia we faced it. We face COVID-19 in all sectors, but somehow, agriculture, supply chain, migrants, and so on. But not much discussed is how we have done faced power system operations during this time. We have normally hailed medical professionals and essential service such as water, cleaning staff, and so on. But our grid operators went on supporting us every day without fail, and they are also to be saluted. They worked in very difficult quarantine conditions, in terms of South Asia, this was a test of our cooperation. We supported one another in grid management. There was a 20% or sometimes 35% of demand drop, and to sustain stability of the grid in these conditions was a challenge that we met, all of us met together. We hope today's discussion and our report will help face still COVID is continuing. So not only COVID risk matter, but also other risks, and how we can always face challenges of this type and in future. I thank USAID for supporting us steadfastly in this program, especially Monali Hazra has been a leading light, regional energy director, as regional energy director. She has given many ideas to improve this project, and her leadership has really borne a lot of fruits. We hope that you will appreciate the amount of efforts Irade and others have put into this. I'm also happy that we are doing this with ICC, which is well known for their work in South Asia, especially BIMSTEC area. Let us work together and do better with each other's support. And thank you very much, Mr. Razdan, also for joining us and enlightening us. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for sharing your thoughts with us today. Ladies and gentlemen, now it is time for a special address which will be presented by Mr. John Smith-Sreen, IPO Director from USAID. Prior to his current position in India, he was the Director of the Economic Growth Office for USAID Bangladesh. He is a member of the Senior Foreign Service and has served in 6 previous missions, including India, Jordan, Afghanistan, Sri Lanka, Kenya, and Pakistan. Let's welcome Mr. John Smith-Sreen, please.
Very much, Juhi, and good morning to all. It's a real pleasure to be here today. Dr. Jyoti Parekh, Executive Director, IRADE, Mr. Anil Razdan, former Secretary, India's Ministry of Power. We hope that Dr. Shantishuk Phimphachanh, Deputy Director General from the Ministry of Energy and Mines, Laos, People's Democratic Republic, joins us. I wanted to wish her a special sub-ID because my parents were also in the Foreign Service, so I spent 2 years of my high school in beautiful Laos a few years ago now.
Sir, she will be joining in 10 minutes, sir. Dr. Santisuk will be joining in 10 minutes. Yes, sir.
Very good. Our esteemed panel, illustrious representatives from Bangladesh and Bhutan, Nepal, the Maldives, and Sri Lanka, and of course, all respected participants. The issues we will discuss today are of great importance to South Asia, to the United States, and really to the entire world. We're of course discussing the pandemic that is plagued all of us over the past 2 years and more. And as Dr. Parekh pointed out, it's had devastating impacts on human health and well-being, but the secondary impacts of COVID-19, that's the impacts on economies and infrastructure and ways of doing business, is really more nuanced. And my organization, USAID, is quite pleased that we were able to contribute to a better understanding of some of these impacts on the South Asian power sector. We're here today to release a specific paper titled Risk Mapping and Impact Assessment of COVID-19 on South Asia Power Sector Policy Measures for Business Continuity and Risk Mitigation. And this paper was developed under USAID South Asia Regional Initiative for Energy Integration, SARI, and the event is being hosted by SARI Energy Integration in collaboration with the Indian Chamber of Commerce. And I thank ICC for their support and their willingness to partner on this important effort. COVID-19 has released a relatively unique global crisis, which has unprecedented economic, human, and institutional repercussions. Nationwide lockdowns throughout South Asia resulted in significantly constraining commercial and industrial activities, causing contractions in power demand and a decrease in the high-paying customers, with a simultaneous increase in subsidized consumers. The ensuing disrupted revenue and cash flow brought about some serious financial stress for utility companies and the sector as a whole. While all utilities were impacted, it was really the power distribution companies, one of the most critical links, as you all know, in electricity supply chain, that were arguably the most adversely impacted by the pandemic. They faced challenges in ensuring the continuity of service while facing difficulties such as an inability to physically access meters so that they could be read, and a high reliance on in-person cash payments. In addition, they had to pay power generators for capacity charges even as demand for power reduced significantly. Throughout the pandemic, USAID continued to support countries in their efforts to mitigate both direct and secondary impacts of COVID-19. Some examples of these contributions in the power sector, in addition to today's efforts under SARI, include USAID's Smart Power for Advancing Reliability and Connectivity, our SPARC project, assess COVID-19's effects on the Indian power sector. And SPARC released a paper that evaluated the pandemic's potential impact on power demand, supply, resources, utility finances, and investments, and made specific recommendations to ensure business continuity, avoid customer disruption, safeguard critical functions, and identify long-term actions. USAID also launched a national level program known as RAISE, the retrofit of air conditioning to improve indoor air quality for safety and efficiency. And under this national program, we partnered with Energy Efficiency and Services Limited in India to make workplaces healthier and greener by focusing on enhanced indoor air quality. This was particularly important given the amount of time we were all spending indoors during the pandemic. USAID developed a COVID-19 response readiness and recovery toolkit for industrial and commercial establishments, and helped 2 Indian utilities implement a gender-sensitive COVID-19 response. But I digress. Let's return to today's focus on our collaboration under SARI, where we analyze COVID-19's influences on the South Asia energy sector. As in India, our analysis showed that peak power demand declined by up to 12% in Bangladesh, 28% in Bhutan, and 18% in Nepal. A very interesting aspect of our research was the proven benefit of regional energy cooperation in dealing with the pandemic. In addition, SARI also analyzed India's 9-minute 9 p.m. event where power was shut off that showcased how cooperation among system operators in the region helped to minimize grid challenges. Cooperation works, and regional cooperation works best. Today, we are ready to launch the policy paper developed under SARI that evaluates the COVID-19 on the power sector impact in South Asian countries and provides policy recommendations to the respective governments for mitigation of associated risks. The study explores the various impacts associated with the pandemic, such as a reduction in demand, the impact on supply chains, project execution, grid stability, safety, utility finances, and investment. Based on the detailed assessment of the impact of the pandemic and the various measures undertaken by each of the countries, this study has made various policy recommendations. The purpose of these recommendations is to better prepare the region's power sector to more effectively meet future shocks and stresses. The recommendations are aimed to improve the resiliency of the power sector. When dealing with a global phenomena like COVID-19, USAID certainly does not profess to have a solution that will address all aspects of this global phenomena. I would suggest that no government, think tank, NGO, academic institution, or power utility does either, particularly if they are working in isolation. We all need to reflect, adapt, and learn from each other's experiences. We need to work together to build a more resilient South Asian power sector that helps utilities reset and recover while avoiding customer disruption, allows for business continuity, and paves the way for regional energy security. Energy security drives economic growth and creates social opportunities. Energy security will help all of us recover more quickly from COVID-19 and other disasters. I hope this study is useful for policymakers in South Asia and seeds some ideas toward mitigating the effects of the pandemic or helps prepare for different shocks and stresses to the power sector in coming years. The paper is but one aspect of our work, and today's panel discussion will also provide firsthand insights into the measures taken by each of the countries represented. We hope that today's dialogue will continue into the future as we all learn from each other and support each other, especially during times of duress. Unfortunately, I won't be able to stay for the entire program today as I have another pressing engagement, but I really look forward to continuing to partner with all of you to build a more robust and resilient South Asia power grid. Again, I'd like to thank Dr. Parikh and Pankaj Batra, Anuradha, and the SARI team, Sareen Ghoshal, and the team from the Indian Chamber of Commerce, all of our esteemed panel members and guests. Thank you all and stay safe. Back to you, Julie.
Thank you so much, Mr. John, for sharing your kind thoughts, views, and ideas with all of us today, and many thanks for joining us. Ladies and gentlemen, as we move on, may I now request Dr. Santisuk Phimphachan, Deputy Director General, Department of Energy Policy and Planning, Ministry of Energy and Mines, Lao PDR, to kindly speak on COVID mitigation experience in the region's power sector. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Santisuk has 20 years of experience on transmission line planning and inspection. She has participated in numerous international forums advocating sustainable development of the power sector. We welcome you, Dr. Santisuk.
Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you to all the organizers. Good morning and good afternoon. Your Excellency, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. My name is Santisuk Phimphachan from Department of Energy Policy and Planning, Ministry of Energy and Mines. Nice to meet you all. First of all, I would like to thank you very much to the organizer who are inviting me to be the speaker today. And today I'm going to present you on the COVID mitigation experience for the lesson learned and challenges of implementing multilateral power trade LTMS PIP. Next slide, please. This content I will present today to talk about the policy and the challenges on the how to trade in TMS and ASEAN, and also in the case of COVID-19 in ASEAN, and the conclusion and Q&A. Next slide, please. Laos is in the center of Indochina. We have connect with land with Thailand, Cambodia, Vietnam, China, and Myanmar. Our population is about 7.7 million, and we have leaks of hydro. We have a hydropower potential about 26,000 megawatts. Next slide, please. This one I would like to show you about the power sector policy and strategy, because Laos is a developing country. We have developed on the hydro for supply to the domestic and also export. Currently, we have electricity production energy mix with the hydro power, coal-based thermal, wind and solar, and we have based on the investment for the domestic supply. And the electricity energy must be allocated according to the proportion of 75 being sourced from hydropower, 14% is from thermal energy, and 11% is from renewable energy source. And we also have development for the energy mix for 30% by the year 2025. And we also develop of the transmission line system development to link up the transmission line system to achieve the national-wide covering and also improve the interconnection with the neighboring country. And we also improve for the electricity for the household use, like a distribution system. And our government target have 95% to the year 2020 and 98% by year 2025 and 100% by year 2030. And currently we have promoted the electricity exportation across the GMS country to achieve the under the MOU Versailles, and we also support for the ASEAN, especially for Laos, Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore. We call this a LTMS PIP. Next slide, please. This slide shows you for the power generation source. Currently, we have hydropower about 70 projects. Coal thermal is a one project, is a Hong Sa lignite. This one is export to Thailand. We have solar is about 7 projects, and biomass is a 4 project. Next slide, please. This slide shows you for the existing grid interconnection with the neighboring country. We have connect with like CSG is a China Southern Grid, EVN is a Vietnam, EDC is a Cambodia, and Myanmar with 22 kV, and also with Thailand. We have a medium voltage with 22 and 35 kV, and high voltage with 115, 230 and 500 kV. This is for export. And also we have some power exchange. Next slide, please. This slide shows you the current of the MOU with the neighboring country. Laos have signed MOU with Thailand is about 9,000 megawatt, and we commit about 5,005 megawatt. And we also plan to increase more to export. And also we have a MOU with Vietnam to export like the year 2020. We have to export about 1,000 megawatt, 2025 for leaks with 3,000 megawatt, and 2030 is about 5,000 megawatt. And we also have export to Malaysia and Singapore under the project of LTMS PIP. We have phase 1 to export by the year 2018 for 100 megawatt. And now we are currently the phase 2 for under the discussion. And we also have MOU with Myanmar for power corporation to study to export to Myanmar with phase 1 about 35 megawatt via 115 kV, and phase 2 about the year 2025, about 300 megawatt for using T213 kilovolt. And we also signed a PPA with Cambodia to export about 3,000 megawatt start from 2024 and 2026. Next slide, please. This slide shows you for the ASEAN power grid that we have planned for the interconnection together to do the power exchange and also the business on the power trade. Next slide, please. This slide, I would like to come, but not give you more detail about the COVID-19, but we just concerned about how is COVID-19 pandemic happen and what going on about the energy demand and something affect to us during the pandemic. Next slide, please. This one is show you for the economic goal, energy security, and also something related to the challenger and opportunity. I will not read into, but I will give this for you to read later. Next slide, please. This slide show you the energy commodity price for the global market drop in the pandemic before having and strong rebound. This one is to show you how is the demand during the COVID-19, and this is reduced a little bit. Next slide, please. As mentioned here, for the COVID-19 impact on energy sector for the Southeast Asia, for the electricity consumption, normally we have the average for the increase of the energy consumption about 6%. During the COVID pandemic, we have reduced only 1% during lockdown or some economic crisis, something like that. Next slide, please. I would like to share some experience from the lesson learned of Laos, Thai, Malaysia, Singapore power purchase. This one for export to Malaysia and Singapore. The idea is to form the special zone by the year 2013. And the idea is for transfer power up to 100 megawatt from Laos PDR to Singapore via Malaysia and Thailand by using the existing network. We didn't have to invest the new transmission line, but we use the existing one, and we set up the working group to work on like a technical task force. We have technical, commercial, legal and regulation and tariff structure. For more detail, I already put in the presentation. Maybe you can study later. If you have some question, can send me the question. Next slide, please. This is come to the end of my vision. Laos is have set up the top priority of the national energy development for the hydro potential available in order to support to the region, power trade, and also optimizing the energy mix with the GMS and ASEAN. The pilot project for export cross-border power trade involved for ASEAN member states like Laos, Thailand, Malaysia, and Singapore, which serve as a pathfinder to enhance the multilateral electricity trade beyond the neighboring country here, and also for forward the liberalizing the ASEAN power grid. We have a lot of challenges and obstacles like a technical, legal and regulation and harmonization on the standard. This is the end of my presentation because I have the limit time for 10 minutes. For another important, I already put in the slide. If who interesting can take a look on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Santisuk, for joining us today. And thank you for such an informative presentation that will leave us more informed than before. Thank you so much once again.
You're welcome.
Ladies and gentlemen, we move on, and it is time for the keynote address, which will be presented by Mr. Anil Razdan, former Secretary Power, Government of India, who is an eminent energy expert and consultant advising multinational consultancy organizations and others, and also contributes strategy, opinion, and papers on energy to various prominent journals and media, as well as television debates and discussions. He's been a prominent invitee to meetings of International Energy Agency Paris. We welcome Mr. Anil Razdan.
Sir, you're on mute, sir.
Yeah, a very good morning to all participants, and my special greetings to friends from South Asia region. Jyoti Parikhji, my old friend, John Smith, heading USAID, Dr. Santi Sook, Pankaj Batra, my old colleague, and representatives from Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Bhutan, Nepal, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Maldives, whom I'm sure have tuned in, though all of them may not be speaking in this particular session. I think this session is very, very timely. And in fact, is very pertinent to what the world has gone through, and particularly the pains of developing countries, which I think John brought out very succinctly, that what was the kind of impact. See, I would say that COVID-19 was almost a prolonged black swan event. We've had black swan events like cyclones, internal strife, maybe sudden spurts, some terrorist attacks, etc., in some regions. And the system tries to react immediately. It can be local, it can be national, regional, or even global. Unfortunately, the last event was global. It had a global reach. And some countries, particularly bigger ones, and maybe the developing ones, had a bigger challenge on their hands, because a lot of them were under transition. They're developing infrastructure. They were developing systems. And in some countries, as John pointed out, we are in the process of privatizing some of these utilities and businesses, making them more commercial. And nothing could be more disruptive than the kind of impact that COVID-19 had on all this activity. What happens in a black swan event? We have experienced cyclones, super cyclones in the past. And I do remember, I think it was the year 1998, 99, when I was also handling transmission in the power sector, that we had the Orissa super cyclone. And we were taken totally unawares how to handle that situation. Early warning systems, they're useful. Emergency measures, communications, how to develop alternative communications, because communication systems should not break down. And what happens in a pandemic like COVID-19? The world did not know how to react to it, how to prevent it. So the next best thing, impose a lockdown, keep everybody indoors. Now, what that meant a huge disruption in your commercial operations. Hydropower plant, okay, nature does not interfere. But a coal-based plant needs its regular supplies of coal. It has to be mined. It has to be transported. Similarly, petroleum products. The petroleum sector, unaccustomed to that kind of demand drop, suffered its worst ever drop in prices, as you have seen. Because the whole economic world, of which the power sector forms a fulcrum today, stands on the foundation of economic stability, economic activity, demand, borrowings. It's all somebody else's money, which is invested, which has to be returned. And as we are increasingly asking for the state to move out of this sector and bringing in private sector, it means a greater risk assessment. an assessment into the future, to be able to develop response systems. Now, COVID-19 was an unprecedented health emergency, fatalities, and an unprepared state apparatus, as I pointed out. There was an element of surprise. There was economic shock. There was disruption at workplaces, normal life, marked by a confused response. So what happened? Governments just imposed lockdown. The extremely confused on how to react to the situation. Now, this was a classic learning lesson, though a very expensive one and an unfortunate one for the world at large. And I think US aid and IRADE have done a wonderful job in trying to document this for a developing region. On how do we react to such a situation? What should be our preparedness? So after all, it's a learning. It's been an expensive one. And I would say particularly on the commercial sector, the effects you see are on the banking sector are yet to be felt. Maybe governments do not want to come out openly with the impacts. And also, what was important was that the power sector did not let down the populations. Power supply was not disrupted, even at the cost of huge commercial losses in some areas. And in India, I know, in East India and also parts of West India, we had a compounding problem of the cyclones. Now, this is something which is, I think, endemic to South Asia, these calamities. And by climate change, they may grow more into the future. So physical restriction on movement of personnel, non-availability of inputs, drop in commercial and industrial consumption, as John pointed out, your paying customers are under lockdown, commercial spaces, industry. That leads to revenue imbalance. How do you read meters if you do not have remote meter reading? Recovery of dues. What is your methodology of recovery of dues? Is it physical or is it electronic? And the dangers of a tariff that is skewed towards higher tariff on commercial and industrial activities. And if their consumption comes down, how do you balance the economic activity? So it's a wake-up call, I think, for all sectors, including regulators who are setting tariff. That how do you do risk mitigation to meet another such calamity into the future? As I said, what are the learnings? I think it's imperative that you go in for remote and smart metering so that your till keeps working. Electronic billing and electronic collection. So wherever possible, you reduce the human activity and reduce the uncertainty factor, so to say. Fault repair, how do you repair faults? I think this is a classic case where drones, which are pleasantly being offered as solutions to grid management and even in the distribution sector, can come into play and be demonstrated. And I think US aid would do well in bringing these technologies to this region and showcasing how do you deal with such a situation with the help of technology, with the help of experience of those who've been through it, and maybe wisdom of think tanks like IRADE, who collate all these experiences and are able to put across a document like Pankaj has done. He's handled one of the largest technical institutions dealing with the power sector. We should develop robustness in the system without compromising on the quality of service. This is a learning experience, unfortunately, an expensive one, and we sincerely hope that it is not repeated. Meanwhile, business plans have to be relooked. Risk factors have to be rechecked. And all in all, we've got to produce a sector which physically delivers, commercially survives, and for the customer keeps improving the quality of service and its reliability, as well as looking after your employees, how to ensure their safety while at work. I'm extremely pleased to have been present in your midst today among so many friends, because my association with the SARI program goes back almost 2 decades, when it was first introduced in India at the initiative of USAID. And the beginnings were probably laid in Nepal, seeing its hydro potential, how the rest of the South Asian region can benefit from power exchange, from power connectivity, and mutual reliance and cooperation to each other's advantage. I'm so glad that the grid has reached far and wide, as far as Laos. And hopefully, these countries will feel the togetherness, the need to live together. If they can come to each other's assistance in time of need, where one is in a crisis, the other can help out. That's what linkages and relationships do. My best wishes to the venture. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for that wonderful presentation, and thank you for sharing those valuable ideas with all of us today. Thank you once again. Ladies and gentlemen, as we move on, it is time for a group photograph, and may I request all the panelists and all the audience members to kindly please put on their video mode so that we can take a group picture, and this could be remembered for a long while. Requesting all our panelists and everybody who's joined us today in this webinar to please put on their video modes, please.
Sonam Tokche. Thank you.
Let's move on. Okay. Dear friends, we will now be releasing a report on risk mapping and impact assessment of COVID-19 on South Asian power sector, policy measures for business continuity and risk mitigation. And we request Erade to kindly please release this report. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, after releasing this report, we come to the conclusion of the inaugural session, and we will now be moving on to the next session, which is session number 2. This session will be a presentation on the paper on risk mapping and impact assessment of COVID-19 on South Asian power sector. This will be presented by Mr. Pankaj Batra, Project Director, SARI EI, covering the following countries: Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Bhutan, Nepal, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Maldives. Before I hand over the session to Mr. Pankaj Batra, ladies and gentlemen, let us know a little about him. In his current role, he is responsible for spearheading the SARI EI program and ensuring attainment of its objectives of promoting integration of energy systems and enhancing cross-border energy trade among the South Asian countries. Mr. Batra is considered as a thought leader in the power industry in India, with more than 35 years of experience across several key positions, including serving as the chairperson and CEO of the Central Electricity Authority. So with this brief bio, may I please request Mr. Pankaj Batra to please take over from here. Sir.
Thank you, Juhi, and welcome to all our friends from South Asia, respected Anil Razan Saab, who's I was working with many years back, and because he still continues to be very active in the power sector. And that's good because he shares all his experience, wealth of experience. Mr. John Smith-Serene, the head of the Indo-Pacific office in USAID India, Dr. Jyoti Parekh, executive director of IRADE, Monali Zaya Hazra, regional energy manager in USAID India, and of course all my friends, Mr. Muhammad Hussain, Mr. Sugat Dharmakirti, Mr. Sonam Tobje, Dr. Irfan Yusuf, and also Mr. Ajwad Mustafa from Maldives, who we're fortunate to have because we find it difficult to connect with Maldives, and it's nice that we have. And of course, welcome Dr. Santi Sukh for giving this presentation on the impact of COVID-19 on in your country with Lao PDR. And of course, what I saw was it didn't affect it to a very large extent as we had in India, which we'll see from the presentation that I give. But by and large, all the issues seem to be the same. So when we go through the presentation, you'll be able to see the impact and of course, the policy recommendations, which are important for the policy makers. So I'll share my screen. I hope you're able to see it. Juhi,
Yes,
are you
sir.
able to see it? Right. Okay, right. So this is, we took a lot of information on this from the public domain for all the countries of South Asia. Some of the countries we didn't get too much information, but we through a lot of means, through either getting information directly from the respective countries or from the public domain, we've compiled this report and of course analyze the impact and try to give some policy recommendations which would lessen the risk of it being impacted to such a large extent as what happened. This is the cover, and this is basically the contents where one of the sections is on impact, then the measures which were undertaken by the various governments and the lessons learned, and finally a broad-based business continuity plan for the South Asian power sector, along with recommended policy measures and regional framework for risk mitigation. So it's basically contribution from all the countries and my own colleagues, which are there in this. Now, when we analyzed the impact on the power sector, we categorized it into these headings, which is, of course, the impact on the reduction in electricity demand. And as a result of that reduction, a number of other factors which came into play. Impact on electricity trade across South Asian countries, the impact on the fuel supply risk, which is the supply chain, impact on project delays, which could be delays in construction, erection of new power plants or substations, impact on grid stability and operational risks, impact on manpower risk, and impact on financial condition of utilities, which seems to have been the largest risk. So we went country-wise analysis, start in alphabetical order. This is Afghanistan, where it imports power from 4 countries. It has its own generation, but it's largely imports power. So it imports 3 times the power that it generates by itself. So if you can see, this is the power generated by itself. It's predominantly hydro, which forms 53%. It's important to give a background of these countries so that people would appreciate the steps that the government took for this. Then that's followed by fuel. That's thermal plants, which is fuel, diesel, and HFO. This is the imported power, which it imports from 4 countries, and predominantly from Tajikistan and Uzbekistan, major power import from these countries, besides Iran and the other country. Now, on 25th March 2020, the Afghan government declared a lockdown in these 3 provinces, Farah, Herat, and Nimruz, and which was extended to Kabul, Kandahar, and Logar on 26th March. And of course, all these lockdown was released on 21st May. The energy consumption decreased in April 20 as compared to March 20, when before the lockdown, for all categories except residential. So So industrial, commercial, and government consumption declined from 32% to 10%, whereas residential consumption, which in any case formed the major consumption, increased from 67 to 90%. Bangladesh, this is what it was generating fuel-wise in 2019, financial year 2019. Majority of it, as you can see, is natural gas, which forms the predominant portion, and followed by furnace oil. Its categorized consumption: domestic is the major consumption, which is 57%, followed by industrial. The government of Bangladesh imposed a complete lockdown from 26 March to 30th May. And of course, the final set of restrictions were officially lifted on 1st September 2020. The industrial consumption reduced by 35% in April 20 as compared to April 19. So we are comparing year on year, the same month, so as to get an idea, accurate idea. The commercial consumption reduced by 33%, residential consumption increased by 8%, and irrigation increased by 33%. So if you see the year-on-year generation of Bangladesh, you can, the one in orange is for 2020, and the one in blue is 2019, and 2020 is when the pandemic happened. So you can see the sudden drop in generation from March to April. So right up to January, February, and March, it was exceeding the previous years. And suddenly, when the lockdown happened, it decreased substantially as compared to the previous year, and it kept reduced, although slightly as these lockdown measures were getting relieved. It started increasing again, and from July onwards, it has again become higher than the previous year. So this gives an idea of the lockdown period. In Bhutan, you have predominantly hydro, as you can see, almost 100% hydro with a small amount of diesel. And the category-wise consumption is majorly industrial in Bhutan, which is 77%, followed by residential. In Bhutan, the first case was confirmed on 5th March, and after that, the government imposed 2 weeks of restrictions by closing schools and educational institutions. On 23rd March, it shut down its international borders and adopted a range of strict measures. Lockdown was declared on 10th August 2020 and ended on 14th September. Industries such as cement, ferroalloys, ceramics, which have a share of 78%, they became, some of these industries became non-functional, not only due to for security, but also due to import restrictions on raw materials. and limited manpower. So if you see the peak demand of Bhutan, how it has changed. So if you can see again, January, February, March, it was higher than the previous year on the same month. And from April onwards, it reduced as compared to the previous year, and it kept as it was lower right up to December as compared to the previous year. India has predominantly coal-based generation, as you can see, 70% by coal for the financial year 20, followed by hydro and then renewables, 10.83 and 9.62%. Its category-wise consumption in India is majorly industrial, which is around 42%, followed by domestic or residential, 24%, and then agricultural, which is about 17.67%. Now, India imposed a complete nationwide lockdown for 21 days on 24th March 2020, and the lockdown measures included suspension of public transport services, shutdown of industrial activities, education institutions, malls, and other public places, and only essential services were allowed to operate. This was extended till 30th June, and the construction sector was allowed to open after 20th April 2020, and in May, some more exemptions were granted. And there were 3 zones, which were red zone, orange zone, or green zone, green zone being no infections and red zone being the highest with infection hotspots. So there were different methods of dealing with each of these zones. Unlocking started from June 22 and was gradually, there was unlock 1, unlock 2, unlock 3 and industries. So this is the consumption. If you compare again with the same month last year, it's higher in January and February as compared to previous year. It became a little lower because lockdown was introduced on 25th March. And then it has stayed low, but it has started picking up as unlock 1, 2 started. And from September onwards, it has exceeded and it kept on high. So that's how industrial activity revived. And now it's sort of not exactly pre-pandemic levels, but better than the previous month, same month previous year. Nepal is predominantly hydro again. We've showed different colors. That one is the one which is Nepal Electricity Authority, owned by NEA, is 47%, and almost the same amount, which is the IPPs, independent power producers, which is 47.4. So totally, it makes about 95% of the total generation is from hydro, and the remaining is from thermal, small amount. As far as category-wise consumption of Nepal is concerned, it's majorly domestic, which is 45%, followed by industrial, 37%. In Nepal, the countrywide lockdown came into effect from 24th March 2020, and the government started easing it on 12th June, allowing shops to open. And then further 15th June, some of these private offices and banks reopened, and government staff was coming in shifts, and lockdown ended on 21st July 2020. Nepal it reported a decline of 20 to 25% in peak demand and around 30 to 35% in energy demand just after lockdown. So you can see this Nepal power consumption, how it has, again, comparing to the same month in the previous year. In January and February, it is higher. And after imposing lockdown from March onwards, it's reduced. But it started picking up. And in the month of July to September, it started picking up, and it started exceeding the power consumption as compared to the previous year. So that's the general sort of thing which we can see in most of the countries. Maldives, we didn't get too much information in the public domain, but Maldives has actually got distributed grids because it's one of the most geographically dispersed countries with 1,192 islands spread across 90,000 square kilometers. And electricity is generated by a patchwork of independent, isolated, island-based grid systems. There are 186 powerhouses on inhabited islands, collectively generating 319 megawatt from diesel And resort islands independently manage their own electricity supply, and they have an installed capacity of 210 megawatt as of 2018. The maximum power consumption is in Malé, the capital of Maldives, and it's mainly residential consumers followed by business. Although they have a plan to switch to, Maldives has a plan to switch to renewables in the future. You can get an idea of the categorized consumption and also the value in terms of Maldivian rupee. So if you see the total in kilowatt hour basis, domestic is the highest consumption. This is in Malé, followed by business and then government. But the revenue which is generated is maximum from business, which shows that there's a higher tariff for business as compared to domestic. The impact was that tourist traffic fell in Maldives by 65% from February to March 20, with respect to the corresponding period last year. And no firm figure could be obtained on the drop in consumption, but it's estimated to be in the range of about 20%. Maybe the Secretary Maldives would be able to confirm later to us when we get in touch with him. As far the steps taken by the government, a subsidy of 40% for electricity bills and 30% for water bills was declared for all Maldivian households. Pakistan, again, we got information from the public domain. This is the sort of pattern which is there for electricity generation, majorly by thermal, which includes gas and oil, but majorly natural gas. And the second most is hydro in Pakistan. The category-wise consumption in Pakistan is again majorly domestic, which is about 49%, followed by industrial. Lockdown was declared by various provincial governments in March 2020, and the electricity demand reduced due to shutdown, industrial shutdown, lockdowns in offices, educational institutions, public transport. These were shut down. Demand initially reduced by 25%, but after 3 months, it was down by 7%. So the impact in Pakistan was initially high, but not too much. So if you see this, this is actually the Pakistani financial year is from July to June. So these are the figures we got. So if you see March is the time when this happened. So it's the peak demand has not reduced too much, except a little bit in February as compared to the previous year. So June, it has reduced slightly and become slightly or the same or slightly less. So there's not too much impact on the demand, peak demand. Sri Lanka is predominantly the source of generation is major hydro and coal. This is as in 2018. And thermal is, of course, 23% is basically mainly oil. As far as consumption is concerned, the major consumption is household, which is residential, followed by industrial, and then commercial. In Sri Lanka, the government banned cruise travel on 3rd March 2020 and closed international travel on 10th March to curb cases of COVID. A curfew was imposed on 20th March and was later extended to 27th March as a quarantine curfew. On 20th June, the Sri Lanka government totally lifted the curfew with no case of community infection for the last 2 months. But there's a second wave which started in Sri Lanka in October 20, after which the government imposed indefinite curfew on 4th October on 2 western provincial towns in the suburbs of Colombo. So if you see the net generation of Sri Lanka, you can see that it has been higher in January and February as compared to the previous year, and then it reduced. And then it started picking up in July, August, September, October. And again, when the second lockdown was imposed, it fell below the previous year. Now, how has been the impact on cross-border electricity trade? These are the countries which are, this is the South Asian map. and it shows basically the transactions which are taking place between India, Nepal, India, Bhutan, and India, Bangladesh. The cross-border electricity trade, of course, has been generally increasing over the years. This gives the total cross-border electricity trade for the top graph in terawatt hours, and the bottom one shows country-wise Bhutan to India, which has been increasing. India to Bangladesh has been increasing. India to Nepal increased and started decreasing after their own hydro plants started coming up. Now, export from Bhutan to India, if you see the months, it has increased substantially from May onwards, because India and Bhutan have got an agreement that after utilizing the power of meeting their own demand in Bhutan, all that remaining power is exported to India. So since their own demand reduced, a higher amount of power was available to be exported to India. And therefore, from May onwards, it jumped quite a lot until demand started picking up in Bhutan from July, August. So, but it's, yeah, that shows the impact on cross-border electricity trade. As far as import from of Nepal from India is concerned, you can see that it is more or less the same in February and March. It reduced, and then April it reduced substantially, and May and June, and up till the time its own demand started picking up. So in December again, it increased. Its import increased beyond the same month last year. In Bangladesh, you can see that it was actually drawing less, right, in January and February as compared to the previous year, maybe because of some of their own generation coming up. And here you can see by June it has increased beyond this in the same as compared to the same month last year. So there was a revival of Bangladesh industrial activity, and therefore it has increased. So it gives an idea about how things have changed, moved in each of these countries. Now, if you see the impact of regional cooperation, how regional cooperation has helped. Imports by Bangladesh increased in May 20 as compared to, we are comparing May to April for each of these countries. It increased from May 20, in May 20 as compared to April by 177, whereas in Nepal it decreased by 40, and Bhutan's exports to India increased by 480. So an additional burden of 343 gigawatt was passed on to India because of these changes in import-export. But compared to India's generation in May 20 of 100,000 gigawatt, this amounts to just 0.3%, which is minuscule and could easily be handled. Therefore, cooperation between South Asian countries helped to lessen the impact of the reduced load in Bhutan, Bangladesh, and Nepal. Now, as far as impact on fuel supply chain risk is concerned, there was no problem in adequacy of fuel supply because generation actually reduced. On the contrary, there was an issue of offtake of the normal requirement of fuel for coal, oil, and gas. Bangladesh and Pakistan are heavily dependent on gas for electricity generation, whereas Sri Lanka is heavily dependent on oil. All this is imported. So ships which were carrying this fuel to these countries got stranded at ports because of COVID restrictions, and therefore there was a possibility of attracting demurrages and heavy financial penalties. These countries therefore face the risk of penalty for non-offtake due to the take or pay system which is prevailing for gas, natural gas, and oil. So some of these countries, of course, appealed for treating this abnormality as a force majeure because it was not in their control. So in some cases, there were some relaxations made, in some cases not. Now, this is the impact on project delays. This resulted in project delays due to delay in delivery of equipment or its installation, as well as shortage of commissioning personnel because of lockdown. That some of the labor went home and things like that. New projects were not being considered as essential by the respective national governments due to reduced electricity demand. So there is no pressure to install these new projects because the demand itself reduced. The major impact of these of delays in power plant construction would be increase in the cost of projects because If the project gets delayed, there's increase in interest during construction component, and therefore the capital cost increases. Of course, depending on the extent of time which these projects were delayed, the cost would keep increasing. This would have an impact in the future when the electricity demand revives. Impact on grid stability and operational risks. Since the demand reduced, there was not much of a problem as far as managing the load, meeting the demand was concerned. But the system operators had to back down generation and control the rising system voltages by opening more high voltage transmission lines to contain the reactive power generation. The safety of manpower was one of the most important aspects of COVID-19 because you have to have 24/7 manpower available for running these power stations. And manpower was kept safe through adopting various COVID safety measures. And in some cases, a backup plan for a standby control room was also thought of in some countries in case the main control room got infected. In fact, impact on manpower risk, all the South Asian countries followed health guidelines of their respective national governments. These were reflected in detailed instructions by utilities, some of which issued their own guidelines. And these were followed by the workers and staff, which enabled smooth operation of our system in all countries. And of course, some of the measures that the utilities took was the non-critical work was stopped to concentrate on more critical areas. Face masks, gloves were provided. In some cases, PPE kits were provided too. In Sri Lanka, arrangements were made for some of the O&M staff of power stations to stay in the power station for a few months, and food and lodging were provided to them. We got a lot of this information from, we held a webinar of the head of state DISCOMs in South Asia to see how they dealt with this, and they were represented by almost many of the countries of South Asia, and this is where this was held in November 2020 when we had a webinar at that time. Now, impact on financial condition, this was the biggest risk on account of the pandemic. The adverse financial impact on utilities. These were impacted due to reduced consumption as a result of shutdown of industries and commercial establishments, which were actually the high-paying consumers. And the low-paying consumers, the consumption increased, which is the residential. So there's a double whammy that they started getting, they were adversely affected, that the high-paying consumers went out and low-paying consumers increased. There was also issues of non or partial payment by consumers due to loss of economic livelihood or inability of consumers to pay bills in person, those people who were paying in person. And in some cases, limited, some countries and utilities had digital modes of payment, but some didn't. So this resulted in liquidity issues for the state, for the distribution companies, resulting in non-payment or reduced payment to the generators and transmission companies who they had to pay in turn. In the analysis, when we analyze the adverse financial impact, there are three things which come into this. One is that there's a two-part tariff for all long-term contracts, which is the capacity charge and the fuel charge. So the fuel charge is fine because if you do not use the fuel, you don't pay for the fuel. But the capacity charge has to be paid for whether you use it or you don't. Now, this is since there was a reduced offtake of the full fixed charges had to be paid. So this was one impact on the DISCOMs. This they could not pass on to the consumers because the fixed charge component for consumers is just about 10 to 15%, whereas for bulk power purchase, they have to pay, it's almost about 50%, 40 to 50%. So they had to pay 40 to 50%, whereas they could recover fixed charges, which was a small percent. They could not recover the full fixed charges because that formed only 10% of the tariff to the consumers. The second big thing was that the industry and commercial establishments, which were the highest paying consumers, they since the industrial and commercial establishment shut down, the high paying consumers went off, whereas the low paying consumers, which are the residential consumers, they increased. And that's how the second big thing. And the third big thing was how the DISCOM distribution companies were affected was that many of them were paying physically, and therefore they could not go out to pay since the person-to-person contact was not allowed, and therefore they had a difficulty. Of course, every utility devised some method of doing it, where in some cases through WhatsApp they asked them to take a photo of the meter reading and send it to the distribution company, and based on that bills were prepared because the meter readers were not going physically there because of the lockdown. So that's the third sort of big thing, and some consumer of course could not pay due to financial constraints, due to loss of livelihood. Now, as far as policy recommendations are concerned, one of the big things which would be helpful would be regional cooperation, as we saw in the how it helped Bhutan, Sri Lanka, and as Bhutan, Bangladesh, and Nepal. But another thing which will happen with increased regional cooperation is that if you have more of it will help to optimize, use the generation free energy, and back down on the fossil fuels. So you don't need to consume fossil fuels, which is a cost. Whereas free energy like hydro, if it was spilled, that's zero energy which got lost. So if you have regional cooperation, you save on fuel and also definitely emissions, therefore. Now, the other thing is that in the power purchase agreements, there should be a fair sharing of risk because this pandemic was not mentioned in most of the PPAs as a force majeure condition. Force majeure condition, which includes floods, earthquakes, which disrupts there, none of the two people, buyer or seller, are held responsible. Whereas in this case, since it was not mentioned, it came upon the distribution companies that they have to make the payment, even since it was not covered in the agreement. So that sharing of risks has to be mentioned there, and fair sharing of risk has to be there. Similar fair sharing of risk has to be there in the operational maintenance agreements, which could not be executed, or project finance, or land lease agreements, or construction contracts, so that it doesn't fall on only the project developer or the project or the DISCOM, depending on which agreement it is. And then the consumer tariff restructuring, as I said, that if they have to pay to the bulk supplier, to the generator, about 40 to 50% as a fixed charge, and they recover only 10%, then in case of underutilization, the distribution company suffers. So maybe a higher percentage of fixed charge to the consumer would be in order, and reduce the amount of per unit energy charge. So the percentage could, instead of 10%, it could be 20 or 25%. And maybe not make it exactly the same as that, because that will lull the distribution company into lethargy. They have to be efficient also. So maybe a little higher percentage of that. And of course, what is there in most of the countries, South Asian countries, is cross subsidy, which means the industries pay the highest and residential consumers pay the lowest. Now that cross subsidy, if it is reduced by direct subsidy, that would not only have an impact on that would not only benefit from effects like pandemic, but also result in many other benefits. Of course, this is something which most countries are grappling with, to get this done, especially in India, where you have the center state jurisdiction. Then, of course, the financial risk mitigation could be there, where up till the time these measures, which are policy measures, which normally take a long time to get implemented, financial risk mitigation could take place. Then that is the government helping the distribution companies with liquidity, with giving them monies, either a soft loan or a grant to help them tide over the crisis. This is one method. Or the distribution company could take insurance against pandemic and charge that insurance premium in the tariff. That's another way. Then a cost escalation guidelines by regulators. Now, regulators should see that if there are project delays, they can form guidelines on how to measure the amount of cost escalation, which is and to pass on the tariff to the consumers, because it's not the pandemic is not the result of the project developer. It's a force majeure, so the burden should not be put on them. Safety of employees and working conditions is something which was done in most cases and needs to be done as a practice, because pandemic is something which happened 100 years back, and so I think most of the there's not too much emphasis on this, but this could be considered as one of the contingency measures, or if there's some contingency happens, how to handle this. This could be put in a normal method or procedure. Then digitalization is another thing which would help, because as we saw that if digital payments are there, bills are provided electronically, and payment is made electronically, then the amount of the discoms which suffered, which did not have much of digitalization, would be reduced to a large extent. As I said, disaster management plan can also take care of pandemic, how to handle this for each of these stations, for the transmission system as well as the generation. Enhancing cyber security is something which can happen, that in case some mischief makers try to make use of this situation through cyber attacks, then this cybersecurity measures should be increased. And of course, if you have increased use of renewable energy sources, then the fuel supply chain will disappear altogether, since this comes straight from nature. Local manufacturing would also help in having that supply chain risk of equipment if it comes from outside. And of course, deep customer engagement would be very helpful to be able to communicate in some emergencies, either to have through WhatsApp or email or other things. Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, Mr. Batra, for sharing that detailed presentation with all of us today. And clearly, the way forward will be taking the learnings forward from here and building on the work that has already been done. Thank you once again for sharing that detailed presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, after that wonderful presentation, we move on to the next session. This session is going to be a panel discussion on the topic of the webinar. This discussion will be moderated by Mr. Pankaj Batra, and the panelists for this session are Mr. Mohammad Hussain, Mr. Sugat Dharamkirti, Mr. Sonam Tobche, Mr. Ajwad Mustafa, and Dr. Irfan Yusuf. I would now be briefly introducing each of our panelists. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Mohammad Hussain, for the past 33 years, has been serving in different organizations in diverse positions. Mr. Hussain has been serving as the Director General of PowerCell since the year 2013. He has played a vital role in the development of power generation, transmission, and distribution, and prepared several acts, rules, and regulations for spearheading the power sector development. And he has won several awards and accolades, of which the most recent has been the Global Business and CSR Award 2021 for his special contribution and tireless social services in the development of Bangladesh. We also have Mr. Sugat Dharamkirti joining us as a panelist. Mr. Sugat Dharamkirti is an officer of the Sri Lanka Administrative Group with 21 years of professional experience. Presently, he is serving as the Additional Secretary to the Ministry of Power, Sri Lanka. He has been instrumental in formulation of policies and strategies on power generation, transmission, and distribution. Most recently, he has been the national focal point for the Vienna Convention and Montreal Protocol on substances that deplete the ozone layer. We have Mr. Sonam Tobche joining us today. Mr. Sonam is the Chief Executive Officer of Bhutan Power Corporation Limited. He joined his services in the Ministry of Finance, Royal Government of Bhutan in 1990 before moving to Bhutan Power Corporation in 2002. He has varied experience working in the corporate sector in Bhutan and has served as a board of director in the banking and insurance companies in Bhutan. We have Mr. Ajwad Mustafa joining us as a panelist. Mr. Mustafa is the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Environment. Climate Change and Technology, and the current chairman of the Board of Directors of the Utility Regulatory Authority. Prior to his appointment as the Permanent Secretary, he was the Director General and a member of the Governing Board of former Maldives Energy Authority. The scope of his diverse management experience spans all sectors within the mandate of the ministry, including environment protection and conservation, utility services, technology, and related infrastructure projects. And last but not the least, Dr. Irfan Yusuf, Consultant Advisor at National Electric Power Regulatory Authority, NEPRA, Islamabad. He's done his PhD in Civil Engineering from University of Engineering and Technology, Takshila, and has several awards and accolades to his credit. Ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome all panelists who have joined us today. This illustrious panel is here with us, and this session will be moderated by Mr. Pankaj Batra. Over to the moderator and the panelists for taking this forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Juhi. I guess we should have given a bio break to everyone who wanted it, but at least I needed it, so I've done that. So, let's get on to the panel discussion. I'm especially welcome to all the panelists from the countries which are mentioned by Juhi. We have, as I said, we got a lot of this information from the public domain and which were obtained also from some of the people who are here, in fact, including Mr. Mohammad Hussain. Now, I'd like to ask them, I guess everyone saw the presentation, the information that we showed on the slides. Now, what are the main adverse effects on the power sector in the country, and how were these tackled? So I'll start in alphabetical order. We start with Bangladesh. So what were the main adverse effects on the power sectors in your country, and how were these tackled? Yes, Mohammad Hussain ji, request if you can unmute yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Batra. Thank you very much for your presentation. In fact, in your presentation, you have already outlined all the impacts due to this COVID, and I believe that it's not indifferent for us as well, and also the other member states of the region. Before I answer to your question, in fact, I was listening to Mr. Anil Razdan. He was, in fact, highlighting the impacts as a whole due to the COVID and what should be the remedial measures. So I was listening. It was very nice that he has pointed out some very important issues due to this consequences of this COVID. He was telling that the power sector of this region, particularly I can say Bangladesh, let me go within our Bangladesh power sector was not at all disrupted due to this COVID event. He also mentioned at the cost of huge commercial losses. I'll come to that, what was the impact, and he has recommended to reduce human intervention and introduce technology to avoid future consequences, and he termed it as a wake-up call. But my point is this: not the first wake-up call, because particularly Bangladesh, India, being the countries of this delta, Bay of Bengal, we are used to this sort of, not like COVID-like, but a lot of disasters, even alternate years or 4 years interval. So from that, we learned lesson that definitely we have to have technology, disaster mitigation plan, disaster recovery plan. But even during the COVID, what we have identified that even sometimes this electronic or technological intervention was a problem during the COVID. For example, prepaid meters. We have introduced prepaid meters in Bangladesh. So what happened that the consumers, they used to go for bending their card. So during COVID, the complete lockdown, it was not possible for them to recharge the card. So what we did, we have opened the prepaid meters. So like, that there are friendly hours when during the holidays, if you don't have the balance, you can continue for 24 hours. So instead of 24 hours, we have made it open. So they can even, they don't have any balance, they can use this meters. So sometimes technology also is a problem. But for those who had the digital meters, as we have decided that for not paying the bill, nobody will be disconnected. They could have easily continued. So I think there are some, you see, you have to have some contingency decision for this sorts of unusual incidences. Anyway, as Mr. Batra has asked me, you see, we have conducted an impact assessment, and I found that Mr. Batra has almost covered all the impacts. We have one very major impacts, financial impacts that may not be the case for other countries, like the capacity charge for the IPPs. You know that as our demand almost reduced by 2,000 megawatt. So power plants with the capacity of 2,000 megawatt were remain idle, but we had to pay them the capacity charges, and that is at the tune of around 500 crore, 500 crore taka. And also, as said, that we have also not imposed the consumers for outstanding bills. So we had accumulated outstanding bills of 4,470 crore taka. It was, let me again clear, it was only for 1 year. In fact, from March 2020 to March 2022, and we thought this COVID will not be severe for the consecutive year. So this is only for 1 year, in fact, impacts. So instead of mentioning these figures, let me repeat what are the heads of these financial losses. And we had also financial losses due to losses of BPDB due to the bulk purchase of the electricity from the IPPs. We had the losses for distribution entities. As you see that this 2,000 megawatt equivalent of energy was unsold, so they had to also incur losses, and that was 3,440 crore. We had also losses due to operation maintenance, increase of operation maintenance also. The other also, you see the outstanding loan payment to the lenders. So that was also there. And at the same time, the transmission wheeling charge also reduced by equivalent cost of 435 crore taka. And project most of the projects are delayed, and that has also definitely caused that. We have also tried to quantify those, in fact, losses, which was around 4,850 crore. Anyway, well, I think Mr. Batra, I must thank him. He has gone through all the countries' impact assessment and tried to accumulate everything in his report. Definitely, that is a good document. I would request Mr. Batra, if we can have a copy of that, I think that will be very useful for us. Let me stop here. If you have any supplementary questions, I can answer. Thank you.
Yeah, sure, sir. Thank you. We will definitely share this report with all the panelists, and of course, for the benefit of all the attendees who are here also watching, we will put it on the website, and people can download that. But to all the panelists, we will send you these reports for your reference, and see if it can be useful for taking policy decisions. Thank you. Next, we come to Bhutan, Mr. Sonam Tobje. In fact, Mr. Sonam Tobje was also one of the panelists in that experience sharing that happened in November 2020, where he gave us on what the steps that Bhutan took. And we've taken that. Was what I have done is briefly dealt on the topics. I'm not going to detail of what each country did. So Bhutan also did their own share of how they handle this losses, financial losses. So please go ahead, Mr. Sonam Tobje.
Thank you, Mr. Batra, and it's good afternoon to everybody. Coming to the impact on the COVID by the Bhutan Power Corporation. First, on the demand, we saw almost 11% reduction in our consumption. So that consumptions were mostly because of the closure of the industries and closure of the commercial activities, and the deferment of the construction sectors. So I think that was a dip in our electricity demand. On the financials, so compared to 2019, I mean, like when we closed our financials on 2020, so we almost saw that our profit after tax decreased by around 34%. That is after adjustment, the foreign currency adjustment, so on the borrowings. We also saw a lot of problem in the way I mean, like in the logistic element, because we source our materials and because of the lockdowns, the COVID impact in the area where goods are being manufactured, so it caused a delay in the managing process. Then there was a logistic problem, the shipping problem, the trade or the airport authorities imposing embargo on their own port authorities. So delay in our supplies, and that caused some, I mean, like delays in our some of the few constructions that we're taking, and then in the O&M maintenance materials that we generally source from outside. So these were some of the impacts on the supply chain that has impacted on us. And we also saw that in some of our substation constructions, so we need specialized engineers, especially we were constructing GI substations. So for that we have to bring in engineers from the respective OEMs. And because of lockdowns and because of the quarantine facility, I mean 21 days quarantine period that we have to stay within Bhutan, and people's reluctance to stay 21 days in quarantine. So a delay in our projects. Of course, eventually they had to come, but because of the contractual provisions, but that caused a certain delay in some of our substation constructions that we have been constructing during the period. Then our country went through now still when I'm speaking today, we are under lockdown. We were just open a week ago, and from today morning 5 o'clock. So again, there's a lockdown imposed in Thimphu and in Paro, and of course in the southern belts, it is a red zone. So during this time of period, we have a bit of a difficulty in providing our services. Of course, we keep our people in the containment mode. We work in a containment mode, in isolation mode, so that our people do not come in contact with the general public. And because our people go around everywhere, even the customers are quite apprehensive of how people coming within their premises. So they stay in containment mode, and we follow the health protocols. And these people always, I think every 3 days, they do the COVID-19 test. So of course, when we do this, we are working with a reduced capacity. And especially for our people, especially, they are also quite apprehensive to go move around because of, I mean, like them, possibility of them getting COVID, I mean, like infected. But notwithstanding that, we have to encourage them, we have to motivate them, and we provide them all the necessary safety gadgets, and we strictly abide by the protocols that has been I mean, like defined by the Ministry of Health. So we do that, and I mean, like, as I said, with the reduced capacities, we offer our services whenever there is outages. And during this period of lockdown, I mean, like we ran into meter and billing issues because we could not visit our people, and there was a hue and cry sometime in the first lockdown last year when Thimphu and adjoining areas were locked down for almost 40 days. That gave us a thought of smart metering, and of course meter reading, and somebody was mentioning about the WhatsApp reading, and I think that also we have resorted, and WhatsApp meter reading from red zone areas. I think it was quite encouraging that of the total unbilled people, we I mean, like around 8,000 plus from the red area. So 30% respondents were there, and we are trying to upscale this. I don't know how. Of course, we are trying to move into the smart metering, but I think this is also, I think, something that we should take forward. And on the safety of our people, so people who were on O&M duties really did not get COVID, but because of general movements, so some of a few people, I think, contacted, got COVID virus, but of course, no fatalities. All are recover as on that, thanks to the visionary leader of His Majesty, that all of us are kept safe at the moment. So these were some of the few experiences that we have, especially, as I said, that during the lockdown, we continue to, I mean, like work on reduced mode, and our people are, the priority is that we keep our people safe, because if our people are safe, then of course we have a second, as part of contingency plan, we have a first lot of people, second lot of people, third lot of people, group of people who will be on the field to take care of the outages has been already defined. But no, we want to ensure that down the people who are on a backup should not get COVID infected. That is the more concern from our side. So these were some of the difficulties, and but despite that, I think we are happy to report that we have been able to give power supply to our people, and our priority objective is to give supply to the institutions where, I mean, like health facilities where our people, are in quarantine. I mean, those who are in isolation, those who need critical services. So that is what our priorities are at the moment. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sonam Tobje. And I can tell you that Bhutan has sent a lot of officers of various ministries to the field to see that COVID measures are implemented, because we have interaction with the Ministry of Power, and some of their officers had also gone to the field. Thank you, Mr. Tobje. Now I come to Maldives. Mr. Ajwad Mustafa, we got whatever information was there on the public domain, which was not too much, but we'd really like to hear from you about how Maldives tackled it. And if I've missed anything in the presentation on Maldives, if you can also help fill in those gaps. Please go ahead, Mr. Mustafa. And welcome, of course. Welcome to everyone. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Batra. I think yes. First of all, let me thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity to speak in this panel. I found the presentation very useful. The coverage of Maldives due to the lack of data is, obviously something we can work on. During COVID, like many other countries, the Maldives faced a lot of challenges, especially because we are a tourism-based country. The whole of economy is dependent on a tourist arrival. So when obviously you can imagine when the borders are closed, how much we will suffer. But and also the other problem was, we don't produce, we don't have indigenous minerals, petroleum resources. So most of our power generation is managed through import of diesel fuel to the country. Fortunately, during COVID, we did not experience any disruption to our supply chain, and we were getting the fuel as required. So in terms of even having a sufficient resource, we did not face any issues, and so that was we were very fortunate in that. Even though the international borders were closed, we did get the necessary fuel supply to the Maldives. The other thing, when I inquired from our power producers, the state-owned enterprises, State Electric Company and Fenaka Corporation, according to their numbers, they did not experience any decline in demand during COVID period. Partly because, as from Mr. Batra's presentation, you will see our demand is derived mainly consists of residential demand. The government buildings and the businesses are few in numbers. But in terms of financial value, in terms of tariff, they have a higher tariff, obviously. But in terms of consumption, mainly the demand is coming from residential buildings and households. So during lockdown, what we have seen is, even though the government buildings are closed, but people were staying indoors, so they'll be using more air conditioning and other electrical appliances in their own households. So in some islands, we have observed, the power producers have observed an increase in demand during COVID lockdown, while in other few islands, they have observed a decline. So overall, I can safely say we did not experience such fluctuations during the COVID period. But obviously, this reflects poorly in terms for service providers in terms of finance. Obviously, during the COVID period, the government buildings and businesses that were closed, they will lose a lot of income from that segment, which they used to cross-subsidize the residential customers. And during COVID, what the government also have done is, because because of tourist resorts were closed down. So most of the resorts, what they have done was they have sent their employees to their respective islands. So and they have deducted a significant amount from their pay. There was a significant reduction in pay during that period. So the government found that some of the customers will be difficult to pay their bills. So we have subsidized 40% of their electricity bill was subsidized by the government during the COVID pandemic. And like others have said, we did experience difficulty in accessing customer premises to take meter readings, because most of our consumer meters are old electromechanical kilowatt hour meters. So whereby we have to physically go and take the reading. So during that period, we did find difficulties, and what we did was we took an average of their past 3 months consumption, and we sent a bill on based on that. But we also observed the need for smart metering in future. So the government plans to roll out a digital smart meter scheme in the near future to make us more ready for any such eventuality in the future. Those are major observations, and we have witnessed during the pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mustafa. I just want a follow-up question from you about the demand of tourists, because the tourist traffic reduced substantially during this period. Maybe I guess that since those were fed by private islands, where tourists go, which do you keep a record of the consumption for tourists who go to private islands who have their own arrangement, or that's not necessary?
Unfortunately, for resorts, since it's a private property, we, from the regulatory point of view, we only approve the designs of the power systems, and we do give the operating license, but we don't regulate the tariff, and because there are no customers in that sense, they don't send any separate electricity bills to their guests. So, and also we don't, for statistical purposes, from time to time, we take data from resorts, but it is not a regular practice, so we don't have a regular mechanism where we get data, monthly or annual data from resorts at the moment. But you can imagine, because of the lockdown, most of the resorts were closed. So obviously there will not be any guests in the resorts, and there will be a very reduced demand for in those islands. Thank you.
But even in Malé, I guess tourists would be coming. So would there be some reduction in demand in Malé, which is fed by the utility?
My discussions with the service provider, State Electric Company, according to them, they have actually observed an increase in demand during the lockdown, because of the reasons that I mentioned, because most of people were staying in-house, indoors, and the air conditioning load has gone up and demand has gone up. And for that reason, I think they have observed an increase in demand during the lockdown period.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Mustafa. Now I come to Pakistan in order of alphabetical order. Would request Mr. Yusuf to reply to this question, which I posed, of the main adverse effects on the power sector in your country, and how these were tackled.
Thank you, Pankaj Batra. I'm much grateful and much thankful to ERATE for providing us opportunity to share the knowledge base and the experience we have with regards to pandemic situation in last couple of years. First of all, I would thank all of the organizers who have very diligently undertaken this whole webinar. The report which has been presented, it has compiled a lot of information which is very pertinent and useful. Responding directly to your question, Mr. Pankaj, actually, like India and other big countries in the region, COVID had multi-directional impacts on the power sector. It has resulted in, first of all, decline in the electricity consumption. We faced 9% reduction in the electricity demand. There was as a result, the recovery ratio of the distribution companies, that is also reduced to the 2%. Since there were a number of projects that were under construction due to COVID situation, the supply management couldn't be taken, and because of which they faced some delays in their execution and completion. At least 12 wind power projects, 3 solar power projects, and 2 coal power projects, they have claimed the force majeure as a result of this pandemic situation. And one, of course, one LNG project also got delayed for a 6 months period. At the same time, there were some few supply management issues as well we faced. Since, as you rightly pointed out in your report, that Pakistan is primarily banking on imported fuel-based generation at this stage. LNG, coal, imported coal, they both play a vital role in the energy supplies in Pakistan. Due to COVID situation and the supply management of these 2 fuels, they faced disruption, due to which we had to bank upon other sources of electricity, particularly RFO and HSD, which we managed from the reliable resources. The second question, second part of your question is how the government of Pakistan managed this. Yeah, it was a challenge for us to keep the normal business going on and make the services available to the consumers. Since this was economic disaster situation as well, and people were facing a lot of economic issues, the government had taken very good steps for the support of the people. The first big challenge was to keep the economic cycle running, because we being the developing countries, most of the labor it relies upon industrial wheel as well as agriculture production initiatives. So in that case, we had to engage our manpower to keep on working in industries, as well as to let the agriculture to grow. The government of Pakistan announced a couple of industrial support packages, which helped the industry to grow, keep the momentum going on, and keep running their factories with some added economic benefits as a result. Second, the government took a brave step by announcing that during the lockdown period, which the provincial government had announced, they allowed the consumers to pay the electricity bills in installments, which basically ease out the payment mechanisms for the billing cycle. On the safety side, the government of Pakistan had established National Command and Operations Center that was centrally located, had representation from all the provinces and the key departments. Under that scenario, NCOC critically looked at how the manpower working in the power plants, in the industrial sector, in the agriculture sector, and even in health and education sector, how they are safe from this pandemic situation. And wherever they found that the number of COVID patients are increasing, they imposed micro lockdowns depending upon the situation. In that way, we would try to first of all manage the pandemic situation, and vis-a-vis, we try to keep the people safe from this pandemic, and third, keep the economic cycle running. So this is whole what we did for addressing this pandemic situation. By grace of Allah, things comes to a very positive way, and we didn't mark very negative GDP growth as a result of this pandemic situation. And now, as the things are now easing off, the economy is reviving, and now we're heading towards some better propositions. In a way that more recently, the electricity demand has grown more than 17%, and economic growth is now touching more than 5.2%. Things are reviving. We are heading towards economic revival as a result. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Yusuf, Dr. Yusuf. Now we come to Sri Lanka, Mr. Dharmkirti, Additional Secretary in the Ministry of Power. Yes, please go ahead on the same question of the adverse effects on the power sector in your country and how these were tackled.
Thank you, Mr. Batra, for your detailed presentation, which described the details of Sri Lanka as well, which correctly reflected in your presentation. Really, it was very useful for the policymakers as well as for the implementers in our country as well. I think I may take time to talk about the all questions referred to in your email. There were 5 questions I have raised in the email, so I try to cover all the 5 questions in my my time. Now, coming to the COVID impact in Sri Lanka, I think I can express this as a multidimensional impact. We had multidimensional impact during the entire COVID period. Still, we are experiencing the COVID period. Still, we are facing same difficulties, less than to a certain extent. Coming to the generation and demand side, the daily energy demand, usual energy demand in the country is about 45 to 47 gigawatt hours. Now, during the COVID period, it decreased up to 35, around 35, 36 gigawatt hours daily. And then coming to the maximum night peak, the usual night peak is about 2,500, 2,600 at that range. But during the COVID period, started 2020 to 2000, I think. During maybe
I didn't get it, Mr. Dharmkirti. How much was it during COVID?
You mean the
peak demand?
Night peak. Yes. Usual night peak is about 2,500 to 2,600.
Right.
Sometimes it goes up to 2,700 as well. Recently, it raised up to 2,700. But during the COVID period, it was about 2,100 to 2,200. Okay. Daytime peak may be around 2,200 to 2,300, but in COVID period, it was around 1,500. So that is an advantage for the electricity sector. We were fortunate to receive rainfall as well during the COVID period. So the generation from coal and thermal power plants was minimal compared to the generation from hydropower plants. Then when it comes to the negative side, the issues we encountered some some employees were reluctant to report for duty due to the COVID impact, but the regulations were imposed by the government to report for duty for all the employees who are engaging in the essential services like utility and health services. So that manner we were able to manage with all the activity, all the essential service activities in relation to the electricity sector. And the breakdowns, all the breakdowns were attended.
Could you speak a little louder, please?
Sure. Okay, thank you. Then due to restriction imposed by the government, the movements were little bit. The employees were bit harassed, unable to report for duty due to restrictions, but the government arranged special permissions for the utility employees to report for duty with additional transport facilities and the permission issued. And then, as many other countries, the construction and development part was delayed. Particularly the construction of a transmission line and the grid substations were highly delayed, and our loan and funding agencies we negotiated with the funding agencies like ADB and the other the donors. So we were able to get relief from that side to extend the contract period. Then manpower, we strictly adhere to the health guidelines issued by health authorities of the country, and the employees were deployed under strictly adhering to the health guideline issued accordingly. Then, the generation, transmission, distribution, all were attended in time. Particularly the distribution meter reading were attended, deploying the relevant staff. The smart meter availability of smart meters in our country is very limited. It was very convenient for the utility to read by using smart meters in the country, but unfortunately the smart meters were very limited in there. Now the government is taking action to increase the number of smart meters to face such situation in future. Then the one unfortunate incident happened in Noracholeka coal power plant, where the Chinese staff is working. It was really it was about to close down because of the COVID patient reported at that site. But anyway, the utility was able to control and manage the disaster and brought it into control. The situation was brought into control. Then the relief brought to the customer. The customers were given a concessionary period, grace period to settle the bills, and 1 year grace period was given for with some concessionary rates to settle the bills. And during that time, the utility did not take any action to disconnect the line. At the same time, the oil and coal supply were uninterrupted, and any support needed by the government was provided for the supply of coal and the oil. The funding was also made available for the purpose, and at the same time, the COVID management committee was established at the Utility Cell Electricity Board to handle all the matters in relation to COVID cases. Not only in the Noracholeka coal power plant, a few other stations, number of cases were reported in the power plant. So the number of patients were not that much of the patients reported in the coal power plant, but anyway we were able to manage the situation. I think that is all from my side. I think we can proceed discussion with any other matters. Thank you very much, Mr. Bhatt.
Thank you, Mr. Dharmakirti. I'll have just, I think many of the panelists have provided most of the answers, but Mr. Mohammad Hussain, if you're there, just one or two things from how did the government help in Bangladesh? I guess if you're there, I'm not sure if you're there. I think he is not there. So
we also have questions by the audience members if the panelists would like to answer them. There are a few questions.
So it can be, this is the one which is in the Q&A or the chat?
I guess Q&A. Am I right, Sareen?
Okay. So let me
Yes,
ask,
Juhi.
there is one question about how is the cost of transmission line shared, modality of cost sharing for transferring 100 megawatts from Laos to Singapore via Malaysia and Thailand, I think it is. Would you like to answer that, Dr. Santisuk?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. According to this project is start from the spirit of ASEAN, and we use the existing transmission line It means we didn't do any investment. It means from, maybe you can show the last presentation. I have the show the fiscal point flow of the power from Laos to Singapore. We have using like a bilateral between Laos, Thailand, Malaysia, and Malaysia, Singapore. And we use the existing transmission line. From Laos to Thailand, we use a 115 kV. This is a for 100 megawatt. And from Thailand to Malaysia with 230 HVDC. And from Malaysia to Singapore is a 230 HVAC. This one we use to export via the existing transmission line. This is my answer. Thank you.
So I guess Singapore or you would be paying the wheeling charge for using the transmission line.
Yes. For Singapore, they have to pay wheeling charge via Thailand and Malaysia. But in Singapore, we have to bid in the power pool because this one is not a sale like a fixed price. But from Laos, we have Electricité du Laos, or we call it a state enterprise. They are joined with one company from Singapore. They call it a Capel to do on work for bidding.
And how is the wheeling charge decided?
The wheeling charge is from the simulation of the system and also system loss. And they have some number. I cannot share the number.
That's okay. But it's done through system studies, you're saying?
Yes, we have done the study because from phase 1, we have export to Malaysia. It means total of generation plus with wheeling charge. And we have a landing price to Malaysia. After they pay, we pay wheeling charge to Thailand.
Okay.
Yep.
Right. And the other question is, will there be a collective plan to have 100% green sources for generating power in South Asia in the long term? In the long run, taking climate change into issues into consideration. Yeah, but I think that's the no one country can give an answer. Each country would have its own targets for green energy. So I guess it's dependent on the targets of green targets of each country. For example, for India, it is 500 gigawatt by 2030, and similarly, all countries would have their own targets. So I don't think there's a general answer for that. I think that's the questions which are there. And Mr. Hussain, sorry, if I can ask you one question which I wanted. How did the government of Bangladesh help in order to mitigate the crisis?
Crisis on the COVID?
Yes, COVID crisis. So the adverse effect of on the financial impact, did the government help in that?
In fact, you say during the COVID time, we have prepared a BCP, Business Contingency Plan, where you see we have addressed the COVID regulation, how the uninterrupted electricity supply could be ensured by deporting people in a rotational way. Then we have had our continuous communication protocol, where particularly during the COVID time, we have made some WhatsApp group within the policy makers, decision makers, senior officials to inform each other regarding any problem, and also in order to avoid the COVID affected human resources. We have made alternative office hours. There were backup team also for operational maintenance. For the import of equipments or development projects, we had some compulsory the preconditions like inspection, FAT and others. So we have made those online. We have avoided that so that we could expedite the transportation and import of the equipments and others. We have exempted the, as I said, that the exempted the billing of the consumers, so that the people who were unemployed and reduce their income, they could survive with their whatever the electricity cost implicates. So these are various, in fact, issues, particularly in one word, we have made a business contingency plan during the COVID time. And then after COVID, we tried to scale up our activities so that we could mitigate the losses and other issues after the COVID regime. And we have asked the government to allocate some additional funds for the power sector so that the utilities can survive in spite of their huge losses of due to the COVID. So these are, in fact, in short, our measures for overcoming the problem with the COVID.
Right. Okay, thank you. Just, so basically, the government provided some sort of soft loan, or have they provided it, or they have is in the process of providing it?
So that we have a subsidy already processed. The government has provided additional subsidy for due to this COVID.
Okay. Right. Thank you, everyone. I think it's been a learning experience for everyone, and I hope everyone gains from this policy report, which we'll send to all the panelists and also put for the benefit of all the attendees on the website. Thank you very much for all the panelists. Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Indeed, a very, very interesting session that all of us had with value additions from eminent panelists joining us from different countries today. We thank the illustrious panel for sharing their experiences with all of us today. Thank you so much once again. Ladies and gentlemen, as we prepare to conclude, it is time for the vote of thanks, which will be presented by Ms. Monali Zia Hazra, Regional Energy Manager and a Program Management Specialist from USAID India. Before she presents the vote of thanks, we would like to let everybody know that Ms. Monali, with more than 20 years of experience, has managed several USAID's clean energy programs, including USAID's regional energy programs in South Asia. Prior to USAID, Ms. Zia led the industry and environment team at the Center for Science and Environment, and she has several publications to her credit. We welcome Ms. Monali Zia.
Thank you so much, Juhi, and thanks to all the participants for joining us today for this very interesting discussion and the sharing of findings of the report which has been undertaken as a part of the SARI program. It was very interesting to hear, all the panel members speaking about the various initiatives that they're in their own countries, use of technologies and, subsidies, concessions, and so on and so forth to help the energy sector recover from the COVID impacts. So very interesting conversation. So thank you so much. Let me quickly say the required, acknowledge all the people who have been associated with this particular event. So thank you so much to Dr. Jyoti Parekh and John Smith-Sareen, both of them sort of a part of the organizing team since from SARI, IRADE and USAID. I would also like to thank Mr. Anil Rastan, former secretary, for joining us today and sharing his views on the Regional Energy Corporation and how it could help, with the COVID impact. Dr. Santi Sook, thank you so much for joining and sharing your views and on specifically from the Southeast Asia perspective. I see that there are a number of other things which we could learn from you you from the question which was posed to you, and maybe we can pull you in for other discussions and other webinars as we move forward. But we really appreciate your time. Thank you so much. Mr. Pankaj Batra, thank you again for sharing the findings, for leading the preparation of the report and sharing the findings today, and also moderating the discussion. And thanks very much to our esteemed panel member, Dr. Mohammad Hussain, current chair of our project steering committee. As usual, you've been very, kind with your time, so appreciate that. Mr. Sonam Topje, thank you again. Also, Mr. Topje has been part of our panel again, so we appreciate that. Dr. Mustafa, it's great to have you participate in this discussion. Unfortunately, we have not been able to include, have as much as Maldives presence, but looking forward to having continued dialogue. Mr. Yusuf, thank you so much, Dr. Yusuf. Again, we've not been able to have as much as inclusion of Pakistan in this dialogue, but we hope to continue this, what we have started today. And also to Mr. Shugat Dharmakirti, again, who's been very kind with his time, is also a part of our project steering committee. We appreciate your time, sir, and for sharing your views and what Sri Lanka as a country has been doing. And finally, a quick note of thanks to our organizing team, Sari, Pankajji, Anuradha, Rima, and all the people at the back, and as well as our colleagues from Indian Chambers of Commerce. Great partnering with you on this webinar. Look forward to having similar engagement in future. Special thanks to Sireen, Ghoshal, Juhi, Sapna, and many others. So thanks a lot. And overall, a big thank you to all the participants who joined us for today's event. We look forward to welcoming you and having a dialogue, continued dialogue on similar themes on regional energy cooperation in South Asia. With that, let me turn it back to you, Juhi. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Manali. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for joining us today in this webinar. A lot of learnings for sure for all of us today, especially with the eminent personalities joining us from the industry. So thank you all once again for joining us, and until we meet again, namaste. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.